Coming up Sunday on The Attorneys, going to be joined by Josh Wright at the firm Hollis Wright, talking about motorcycles, motorcycle safety, motorcycle accidents. It sure seems like we're seeing them on the road a whole lot more.
There's no question. You know, one of the statistics we'll talk about on Sunday night, David, is there are 30 million motorcycles on the road, and 35% more likely for a motorcyclist to suffer a catastrophic injury or death than a person in a vehicle. And so there are a lot of these cases, and they have significant injuries. And so we're going to be talking with a great guest that does a lot of this type of work, that's going to talk about some of the safety issues associated with operating a motorcycle, but also what to do if you've been involved in a motorcycle accident and what types of insurances you can recover.
Yeah, it's going to cover some great ground that I think is really going to be helpful. Be sure and join us this Sunday night right here on WVTM 13 News. We'll see you on Sunday, Josh. See you Sunday.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into The Attorneys. We appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about motorcycles, motorcycle safety, motorcycle accidents, what you need to know and what you need to do if you're involved in an accident with a motorcycle. All of that information we'll be chatting about for the next half hour. Would love to have you be a part of the conversation. You can call, text, email, that information at the bottom of the screen all throughout the program. So join the conversation. Our talk tonight is led, as it often is, by Josh Wright of the firm Hollis Wright. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, too. We are lucky tonight. We got a great guest, David Graves from Alexander Shunnarah Injury Lawyers. David is a frequent guest on our shows, been on here multiple times to talk about issues related to motorcycle accidents and automobile accidents, and he's kind of an expert in this area. So, number one, we're happy to have you on.
Well, Josh, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. We're going to be going through this topic, Dave, and this topic is interesting. When you change from a vehicle to a motorcycle, you are 35 more times likely to be significantly injured in an accident and die. And there are 30 million people on our roads operating motorcycles. Some states have helmet laws, some states don't. There's certain rule of the road changes in different states over Alabama. So we're going to be talking about those things today, and David is a great guest to have on to talk about it. First, before we even kind of get started in this, tell me a little bit about your practice and just kind of explain to the viewers a little bit about what you're doing right now with Alex's group.
Sure. Thank you, Josh. I've practiced with Alex for several years now, and my practice is primarily focused around motorcycle accidents, significant car wrecks, trucking type wrecks. So I see a lot of these types of cases, and I have a lot of experience with them, and as I know you do as well. And I'm sad to say that a lot of the cases we work on like this involve very significant injuries where people are very badly injured, and it's certainly an area where folks need to be very careful and make sure they're doing what they need to do.
In general terms, how do you evaluate a case that's a motorcycle case versus an automobile case differently?
I think you really need to take a look at that motorcycle case. From top to bottom, you've got to make sure that you know everything about the case. You've got to find out if there's any witnesses. Certainly in a motorcycle case, oftentimes because of the significance of the injuries, you've got to know what the insurance coverages are and what's available. Those are all things that you've really got to take a close look at in these kinds of cases.
Now, Alabama's a helmet state, but there are lots of states that don't have helmet laws. Is that fair?
That's true, yeah.
So is it I've never really understood that debate. To me, it seems like wearing a helmet's the safest thing you can do, and you got to mandate it, but it doesn't always work that way in states. In fact, I think there are some 30 states that do not have helmet laws. Is that right?
It is, and I don't know why you'd be on a motorcycle without one. The motorcycles look like it'd be a whole lot of fun, but God, they're just so dangerous. Folks really need to be careful, and they need to make sure they've got the right insurance coverages in place to protect themselves in case of an accident. That's critical.
Talk a little bit about that, if you will. Is the insurance for motorcycles going to be similar to what people would generally see and traditionally see with car accidents?
Josh, that's a great question, and what I see in my practice a lot, and we've talked about it on this show before, the underinsured motorist coverage is what's so critical, and we tell folks over and over and over again on this show, make sure you look at your insurance coverages, make sure you know what your policy says. And that most critical thing that you've got to have is that underinsured motorist coverage, because most oftentimes, if there's a wreck involving a motorcycle, it's going to involve significant injuries. The person who causes that wreck is not going to have sufficient insurance to cover the medical bills, the hospital bills, the airlift helicopter bill that flies that person to UAB. And so what we then fall back on is the underinsured motorist coverage that motorcycle rider has. Now, what I see in my practice a lot, and I think you probably do too, a lot of the insurance companies don't like writing that underinsured motorist coverage on the motorcycle itself.
Yeah.
And you've got to be careful about that. It's coverage that you want to purchase if you can, but it's not always offered. And a lot of times I don't see it on the motorcycle that's involved in the wreck.
Yeah.
But then we take a look at that person's coverage at their household. And the underinsured motorist coverage on that person's vehicles at the household will then step in and cover that person that's injured in the motorcycle wreck in that situation.
David did a great job explaining that. We've done whole shows on uninsured motorist coverage and underinsured motorist coverage. In general terms, without going too in depth, David did a very good job explaining it. This UIM coverage protects you if, everybody's supposed to have liability insurance that's operating vehicles in Alabama. And the state has made it more difficult for people to operate a vehicle unless they have insurance. You can't renew a license. You have to have random certifications provided. There are all sorts of rules and things that the state does now to try and ensure that people that are operating vehicles have insurance. So, they may only have $25,000 of insurance though, because that's the state minimum that's required.
Right.
If you have an accident that is a $150,000 medical bill accident because you were on a motorcycle and you broke your legs and you had a fusion in your back and you had to replace certain bones in your body and put rods and steel plates in and whatnot, and that happens a lot with these cases. In those circumstances, if you don't have the underinsured motorist coverage, you're not going to have any coverage other than maybe your health insurance if you have that. And then there are circumstances where people are doing it the wrong way and they cause an accident. They have no insurance whatsoever. You have to have that UIM coverage to ensure and maintain that you're protected. And so I think David did a real good job talking about that. We've done whole shows on UIM coverage because it's such a significant deal. And the message that we pound on the show is not just get a lawyer involved early in cases, but go get UIM insurance. It's very inexpensive insurance. David's right. Some of these UIM carriers don't really want to write it, but it's rainy day coverage. It's what you buy for yourself to protect you and your family members in case that you've been injured by somebody that doesn't have enough insurance.
What are the most common accidents that you see involving motorcycles?
David, I would tell you, I see a lot of cases where a motorcyclist is driving down the roadway, minding his own business. He's even looking out for other folks on the roadway and being that good defensive driver that everybody on a motorcycle needs to be. But there'll be a car coming the other direction that is turning left across his path of travel, and they just, that other driver doesn't see the person on the motorcycle,
right,
and they just turn left in front of them, and so the motorcycle's hitting that car broadside. I see that time and time again. I would say that's probably the most common that I see.
We see those types of cases. We also see weather related cases where motorcyclists operating his motorcycle in conditions that are unsafe, where they're the cause of the accident. Sometimes you've got road conditions like potholes that we see quite a bit of. I have been round and round with the city of Birmingham in a certain area as to whether or not the potholes are their responsibility and whether or not they can be responsible and liable for damage to vehicles and damage to individuals operating motorcycles. And so, road conditions and driving conditions are also two things that you see quite a bit of. And, for obvious reasons. I mean, another example is tires. And I know we're getting ready to go to break, and we can talk a little bit about maintenance of motorcycles when we get back, but you've only got 2 tires as opposed to 4, and if you lose one of them, it's going to be a catastrophic issue on a motorcycle.
Time for us to head to our first break. If you have a motorcycle, maybe a question you would love to toss to our two guests tonight, would love to get that question. You can call, text, email, get that into us. Also find the firm of Hollis Wright. If you search Hollis Wright on Facebook and on Twitter, they are at Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13. Now we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other specific legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family member. Or simply contact us by going to WVTM13.com and click on the Attorneys link. Now we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
Boy, talk about a sobering statistic there. Welcome back into The Attorneys, talking about motorcycles, motorcycle accidents, and motorcycle safety. Would love to have you join the conversation. Call, text, email, that information, how to do that at the bottom of the screen all throughout the program. Josh?
David, I got two questions that I think need to be raised. One relates to licensing, and number two relates to a question we always get, which is, if I was unlicensed but I had an accident, can I still recover? Let's take them one at a time. First, licensing. What are kind of the licensing rules in Alabama about who can drive a motorcycle and who can't?
Sure. A 14-year-old can get a license to drive a motorcycle in the state of Alabama, but generally the age is 16, where they get an M-class license, where they can drive a full-size motorcycle, all that type of thing. And that's how the law applies in the state of Alabama.
All right, now let's talk about, we get this question quite a bit. I was operating a motorcycle. I used to have my motorcycle license. I had not renewed it. I do not have a motorcycle license. I was involved in an accident. It wasn't my fault. Am I prevented from recovering? And that's kind of a complicated issue, but I'm sure you've seen that issue before.
Absolutely. It does not prevent you from recovering, but like all things in the law, it creates an argument for the other side. And so, all of these cases that we deal with, we have arguments on our side that help us recover in these types of cases. And then the other side, the defense, the insurance companies would have arguments on their side, and that's certainly one that they probably raise.
David raises a good point, and what he's raising is this concept of what an insurable accident is and contributory negligence. And contribution to an injury in Alabama can be catastrophic, because if you're even 1% contributorily negligent for your own accident, you can be barred from recovery. Now, there are ways around that, and that's why you get lawyers involved to work your way through the law and kind of lead, guide, and direct and hold your hand through the process to make sure that you can present a claim even if you have some contribution. But in short, those individuals that are not licensed, either that have not gone through the licensing school, have not gone through the driving test, or have not renewed their license for some reason, there is an argument that they could be contributorily negligent for operating a vehicle they're not capable of operating. And so that's one of the arguments. There are some others for licenses, but in short, that's a whole nother issue of the law, and that's why you want to get lawyers involved in these cases early on.
A question we have here, I've seen many times where motorcycles ride side by side in one lane. Can they do that?
They can, but there again, you get back into the arguments in the instance where there is a wreck involved, of what arguments is the other side going to have to deny a claim, to not pay a claim. And that gets back to why you need a lawyer involved early, just like Josh has pointed out.
Generally, I think what we have seen is that's a safety issue, and that's why they will operate that way. They have an obligation, though, and I think David's already alluded to this in the case. They've got an obligation to comply with the same rules of the road that you and I do when we operate our vehicle on the roadway. And if they're outside their lane, if they're causing the potential for people to feel like they're being pushed into another lane, they can be in violation of the rules of the road too. And those the road violations are what ultimately contribute to settlements and insurance money and all those things. So something to take into consideration for sure.
Okay. Another question here about helmet performance laws in Alabama. Are there such?
Yeah, I'll start with this one, and then I'll let David answer a little bit too. We do a lot of product suits at our firm, and helmets performance laws and just the way that helmets perform and how they've increased in technology over the last decade to 2 decades is pretty remarkable when you look at it. There are circumstances where we will handle a product liability suit where a helmet did not perform as was expected. You have a breakage of the outer shell. You've got sometimes failure to properly use whatever component is needed as a chin strap to keep it on. That can be impactful. But a lot of times we have experts that will evaluate the helmets to determine whether or not they performed as they were supposed to in certain accidents. And experts are incredible in this area of the law. I mean, it's unbelievable. One of the experts that we've used in the past is an expert that works for NASCAR that has helped develop their new generation technology in helmets, and he's a biomechanic by trade, but he helps us in those cases. And so, the performance of helmets is a pretty significant deal. Another reason why you want to get counsel involved, because you want to evaluate a motorcycle accident from all perspectives. If you've got a brain injury or a spinal cord injury, you want to make sure that that helmet is being evaluated by a law firm that understands what they're doing and has the experts to evaluate those cases to make sure if you have a claim related to helmet failure or in any respect related to the helmet, you want to just make sure it's evaluated. And I don't know if there are other things you've seen in that area either.
I would say, Josh, that you did a great job answering that question in detail. The short answer to the question of are there criteria, the answer is yes. Right. And Josh really hit on that, and that's something you've got to take a look at in those types of significant injuries.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about statute of limitations. I know that's a question we generally always get. Motorcycle accident going to have similar statutes to that of a car accident?
That's right, and that's an important thing that you bring up, Josh, because the statute of limitations for these types of injuries are 2 years in the state of Alabama. So if you've been injured in an accident that wasn't your own fault, you've got 2 years to bring that claim before it's gone forever. And if you hadn't settled the matter before then, or if you hadn't filed a lawsuit by that 2 years from the date of that accident, then it is over and gone, and you can't bring it.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, though, I want to talk about, and I want David to kind of walk through, if you're in a motorcycle accident, what do you need to do? Because it's different than how we would handle a traditional car case. For example, motorcycles disappear quickly. Right. They're resold quickly. They're salvaged. They're discarded because they don't have the same value as a vehicle. We need to talk about that because failure to kind of handle that process right after an accident appropriately can put you in bad shape when it comes to evaluating a suit down the road.
Okay, we'll get into that whenever we come back. As we head to break, a reminder of how you can join the conversation. If a question popped into your head, go ahead and get that to us. Call, text, email, whatever is most convenient for you. Stay tuned. The final segment of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Firth with the law firm of Hollis Wright. When it comes to a lawsuit against medical professionals, it may seem like the law favors the medical community over the injured patient, and in many ways it does. While not every bad medical outcome is malpractice, it's important to know what obstacles you may face if you're injured as a result of poor medical care. So in tonight's Legal 411, we're answering the question, does medical malpractice really exist? The answer is yes, but if something is ruled malpractice, Alabama law limits the amount of information that can be presented to a jury about a doctor. Medical malpractice is defined as a doctor's failure to use the degree of care and skill that a physician or surgeon in the same specialty would use under similar circumstances.
For example, a surgeon can only be judged by the standards for a surgeon, a dermatologist by the standards for a dermatologist. These standards and the evidence that goes to a jury are controlled by Alabama statute, which is called the Medical Liability Act. This act prevents juries from hearing about a doctor's past mistakes or malpractice issues, limits the scope of information available to the injured party, and prevents any mention of liability insurance, which would pay a judgment, the very point of malpractice insurance in the first place. However, even with these restrictions, malpractice cases can still be won. The law does protect both parties and provides access to the jury system for people who have been injured after poor medical treatment. That's why it's so important to get legal help quickly if you face this situation. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is always free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer the questions you face on real issues every day. And remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
By 30%. Welcome back in to the attorneys, talking about motorcycle safety, and motorcycle accidents. Would love to have you be a part of the conversation. This is the final segment, so go ahead and get those questions in to us. Josh?
David, talk with us just a little bit about if you're in an accident, a significant accident, what you need to do to kind of preserve evidence and do the things you need to at least allow for a suit to be evaluated.
Well, Josh, I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, it's preserving things for the evaluation of that case, and really what you need to do is get an experienced law firm on the case very quickly. You kind of alluded to it, but these motorcycles that have been damaged this badly, they don't have the same residual value that a car might have. A lot of times they're disposed of, they're scrapped very quickly. If a law firm's not involved in preserving that evidence, you want a law firm involved that's, you know, contacting accident reconstructionists that are looking at the scene, that are examining the physical evidence at the scene and making sure every avenue of recovery is explored, all the witnesses are contacted, all of those things that need to be done are taken care of very quickly while the evidence is still fresh and it's still recoverable.
Yeah, and you know, David's group does a great job on these cases. The accident reconstruction on a motorcycle accident has to be done quicker than a traditional car accident. Just think of the sheer weight and the skid marks that you'll leave with a traditional car accident that can help evaluate when y'all start, when vehicles leave the road, when they started their deceleration and skid marking. Motorcycles are totally different. Two wheels, significantly less weight, less traction. So those accident reconstruction events have to be evaluated as quickly as possible. And if a vehicle, in this case a motorcycle, is lost, you lose a lot of the ability to do the accident reconstruction that you want to do, and you lose a lot of the forensic evidence from the motorcycle itself that will tell which way it rolled, if it was laid down, and those types of things. So David's exactly correct, and I think those are just things that have to be done on the front end. It's another reason why people need to recognize, and we talk about it on the show a lot, but David, you know, law firms like David's firm, our firm, and others, we handle cases on a contingency, which means people do the investigation for you. You don't pay anything for the investigation. You don't have an obligation to have an investigator on the road talking with the officer and getting an accident reconstruction expert involved. The law firm will handle all that, and if there's a recovery, they get reimbursed for that. But if there's not a recovery, the person doesn't ever have to pay for that. So, you know, that's the beauty of the contingency concept that firms like David's firm and my firm evaluate cases under.
All right, let's get to a couple of questions. One here: I was riding through a neighborhood, a dog ran out and caused me to crash. Can I bring a claim against the dog's owner?
You know what, David, we do see those type of circumstances, and Alabama has leash laws. There certainly can be a recovery under the right set of circumstances in a case like that.
All right. Another question here: I was a passenger on a motorcycle and I was injured in a crash due to the negligent driving of the operator. Can I bring a lawsuit for my injuries?
That's kind of a complicated question. The negligent driving, Alabama has a statutory code section, known as the Alabama guest passenger statute. So if the driver's just negligent, then the answer is no. But if there is wanton conduct or the concept of gross negligence involved in that type of circumstance, then potentially yes.
In addition to that, to the extent that the passenger is paying for or compensating the driver in any respect, maybe paying for gas. If it's a common carrier circumstance, you're probably not going to have that in a motorcycle circumstance. But there are ways around the guest passenger statute. But David's right. If it's just traditional negligence, oftentimes it's going to be tough to recover against the operator of the motorcycle that you're on. Now, if somebody causes the accident, the third party that caused the accident is on the hook for those injuries.
Right.
On the hook for those injuries, no question.
All right. Another question. I was injured in a motorcycle accident, but I wasn't wearing a helmet. Can I still recover damages from the other driver?
The answer to that is yes also. That, just because you may be in violation of that helmet law in the state of Alabama does not preclude a recovery necessarily. Okay. Like Josh and I have talked about, it's just one more reason that the insurance company might deny the claim, but it's another example of why you need to get an attorney, a good law firm like Josh's firm or our firm, involved very quickly to help advocate on your behalf.
David, talk just a little bit about, I feel like since my practice started until today, the onset of off-road motorcycling and injuries that come from off-road motorcycling has become kind of a significant deal. It's a brand new sport. You see these motocross races and whatnot. I had a case up in Kentucky of a young man that was 17 that was catastrophically injured in one of those races, and the question was, did he assume the liability of his own injury in that case? But talk a little bit about off-roading, because off-roading, there's still ways that you can be compensated in those cases under certain circumstances.
There are, and those are, that's a great point that you bring up, and they're certainly compensable claims. They're claims that you can win on, but they're ones that are going to require an attorney to help you, Josh. And like I'm sure you've experienced, it's not the type of situation where an insurance company is just going to say, we're so sorry that you're hurt, let us just pay for all of that. You're going to have to get a lawyer involved. You're going to have to get them involved early to help you with that type of claim.
I'll give you a good example. The case that I was mentioning in Kentucky of a young man who was badly injured, one of the issues in that case, David, was that there was an exculpatory clause, which is a release that was signed by a 17-year-old before he participated in the race. And the issue in that case was there was a defect in the, it's a long story, but there was a defect in the track that a typical racer would not have expected to be in that track. And the question was the release going to release his claim even though the track created a defect? You can only release what you expect, right? So another reason, like David's saying, get a lawyer involved to evaluate those releases in off-roading to determine whether or not there's a compensable claim. And as in that case, sometimes the answer is, I'm so sorry for your loss, but there is no compensable claim here.
Yeah, real quickly, less than 1 minute, but just a real quick final comment from you, a tidbit tip for our viewers.
I would say, and we kind of hit on it, and we do in a lot of these shows, look at your insurance coverage. Right. Make sure that you have purchased all of the underinsured motorist coverage that you can buy.
Use the benefit of the contingency fee contract. The contingency fee contract is critical. It allows individuals that don't have the resources to evaluate a case to have it evaluated by a lawyer and a competent lawyer that knows what they're doing.
All right, interesting conversation. Appreciate both of you being with us tonight.
Thank you, and David, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it again.
Good job, gentlemen. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us as well. We appreciate it. As we wrap things up, maybe a question that you had was unanswered, didn't get it to us. Here's how you can continue to get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright and find them on Facebook as well as Twitter. We appreciate you being with us. We'll look for you next week right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright.